Is it okay for the church to get involved in the public arena? Should Christians be actively involved in the free elections of the United States of America? Faith Wins is an organization dedicated to engaging pastors, congregations, and Christians in the public arena. Why, you may ask? Because the influence of Christians needs to be felt around this country. Jesus is the solution, and we need to bring biblical solutions to the marketplace of ideas before it's too late, and we need to do it now. There are over 80 million eligible Christian voters in this country, but only 30 million regularly participate in the elections. This needs to change, and Chad Connelly is going to tell you why in just a minute. Check us out online at faithwins.us. That's faithwins.us. When we sit on the sidelines and hope for a better future, the enemy wins. When we mobilize, register, and make our voices heard, faith wins every time. Hey, thanks for tuning in today to the Faith Wins podcast. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg. We're joined today by founder of Faith Wins, Chad Connelly. Chad, today's conversation, the number 5 objection that you get from pastors when you say, hey, I think you should run a non-partisan voter registration drive in your church the last 2 Sundays in September. And they give you all these objections. We've covered 4 of them in the prior podcast, but today's are, well, when do we do it? Yeah. I mean, that seems like a pretty simple thing. So, Chad, you've got a madness to your mind here and why you're doing it the last 2 Sundays in September.
Yeah, and you're right. Most people want to know when, but they really want to know what's the right timing, right? And so, I've done these in churches now for years. We first discovered the power of this in 2010 when I was helping a candidate in an area that was heavily liberal vote, and we targeted churches in that area and maximized the Christian vote and turned a seat from somebody who would vote to kill babies, would vote for anything goes with marriage, would vote for anti-Israel stuff, basically anti-biblical feelings. And we replaced them with a true conservative, a biblical conservative. And so that's when I was sold on it. And so that helped us to coalesce the timing. So we did some around Veterans Day. We did some around Memorial Day. We did some around July 4th, kind of the normal patriotic civic Sundays. We started calling it Civic Sunday or Citizenship Sunday to highlight the importance of Christians being, yes, you're a heavenly citizen, but you're a citizen of America too, and you ought to play out that role. And as we formulated all that, we really came to the idea, and let's face it, this year with the coronavirus, it's even more important we know the timing. We realized we wanted to do it as late in the fall as possible, but outside of that 30-day window of where most states require voter registration to be completed. If you don't get it in sometime 30 days or so before the election, you don't get registered. So that's how we picked the end of September. Then the other thinking part of it, Jim, was if you don't do back-to-back Sundays, you miss people, right? They're traveling, they're with the family, they're out of town for whatever reason, they're sick. Whatever the reason is, doing back-to-back Sundays helps the pastor not only highlight the importance of doing nonpartisan voter registration, but make sure they scoop them all up. I've been amazed. We've already been doing this, of course, through June and July, and now early into the fall, or late summer. But we already have churches doing this, and I ask them everywhere I go, have you ever done it? You ever done voter registration? And the biggest answer is no. And they assume, my people have already registered to vote. And when you challenge them over that and they do some registration, I talked to a pastor just before you and I got on the call, and he told me he pretty much thought everybody was registered. A church of 200, he's registered 22 so far. Even at a time of Corona where he's not fully back to church. He said, we registered 22 so far. We're going to do it every Sunday from now to the end of September. So it's important you pick the right timing. You can certainly do it around a natural patriotic time so that the church can highlight veterans or law enforcement officers, or something like Memorial Day for those who are fallen, or July 4th, our Independence Day. But now that we've passed all that and we only have, a certain number of a bit of time before an election, we're picking the last 2 Sundays in September to pull everybody in and make sure we're outside of that 30-day window.
Okay, so let's add some coronavirus perspective to this, because last night was the first time our church here in Fort Myers, Florida had met in almost 5 months. The last time we met was the 13th of March, and we met outside at 7 o'clock at night after it got coolish, so we could meet outside because we're still not allowed to meet in large groups. What happens? I mean, and right now that's pretty normal across the country. Most churches, certainly larger churches, are not meeting yet. I mean, I talk to people across the country from Arizona and Texas and Florida and Minnesota, and there's a lot of these big churches not meeting. So what happens if we're not yet meeting as a church? Because we know how dangerous singing is. What happens if we're not meeting at church? How do we work around those last 2 Sundays in September? What's the plan?
We're going to be pushing an email out to our pastors, understanding exactly what you're talking about. We have an app, a text system, where if you text the word voter to 76076, we'll send you to the link and let you do voter registration online in the states where that's available. The other thing we're going to do with pastors, because you're right, some of them aren't back. They may not be back by the end of September. We're going to send materials out to everybody on our pastor list, email and text, and we'll follow up with phone call to make sure they have what they need by state. You know, I don't want to be too specific here because states are a little bit different. We're going to send it out by your state. In the meantime, I think I'm going to be in 14 states in the next 8 weeks as we run up to this voter registration drive time so that we get the word out to as many pastors as possible. So we're going to direct them to the online version, or we're going to make sure the pastor has the information to send that material out to the people who might not be registered either.
So you're going to help them work around all of these issues that we've got. And every state, so there are some states where you can't do voter registration online, is what you're saying.
There are some places that it looks like most of the states now you can do a voter registration online.
Okay. All right. So if you're thinking, how do we actually when should we do this? And we're still sticking to this last 2 Sundays in September. There's a way to work around this. If your church still isn't open full capacity, there's some ways to get it done. Not to mention, you could always just have somebody sit at a table and do a drive-up voter registration all week long those last 2 weeks of September, especially if you're in an area of the country where September is gorgeous, which would not be Florida.
That's right.
So, but you could do it in the drive-up, which is always covered, the drive-up canopy at church, because there's always one of those in Florida because we always get a lot of rain. So we've got all the solutions for you right here at faithwins.us, faithwins.us. Chad Connelly, we're excited about September. Thanks for giving us the information today.
Thanks, brother.
And just remember that when you register to vote and you vote your biblical values according to your biblical worldview, faith wins. Hey, thanks for listening to the Faith Wins podcast with Faith Wins founder, Chad Connelly. I'm your host, Jim Brangenberg, and I want to ask you to check out Faith Wins online at faithwins.us. That's faithwins.us. Your vote is needed and necessary, and we all need to learn to engage in our system of free elections right here in the United States of America. If you're not registered to vote, please take time to do so on your local county voter registration website and do it today. In an upcoming election, vote for candidates supporting biblical values and a biblical worldview. Until next time, remember, when Christians engage in the public arena, faith wins.